one of the reasons we built out the application we did with Experion is about customization. In our way of using technology, we effectively automate all of that for the advisor so they can have their own unique philosophy, their own customization, and each client can be uniquely different in their design and behavior, but it's all
Yeah.
scalable.
Let me shift gears now, and I'm going to move us really into the project, the
Mhm,
tool that you built called Tools for
mhm.
the independent advisor. How did, and I know that you had the idea. Now, how did you narrow your search down? You could have bought off the shelf
Mhm.
stuff, I suppose, but you probably looked at some things. How did you go about the process really of narrowing things down to find a partner capable of building commercial grade software? There's lots out there, but finding somebody who's really got the chops to build that commercial grade software. How did you do that?
Um, it wasn't easy per se. I mean, at first, word of mouth, you ask around, who do you know that does this, that, or the other. And at the time, I didn't really know anything about it. I just knew that there were companies out there that could build software, and you tell them what you want and they make it, kind of a deal,
Yeah. Yeah.
in its most basic form. But in terms of having any real practical knowledge of where to go, I didn't really have it other than word of mouth. So it became Google searches,
Right.
looking
Right.
up kind of what I want to build and trying to find, websites where I think may have done something in my industry. And from there it was, having the initial meetings via phone. They take what they think they know and come back to you with a presentation, so to speak. So I probably did it the absolute worst way and got lucky. Um, you know, um, but it's I think where a lot of folks, I think it's how a lot of it happens. When you're a small business and unless you have like practical software work, you don't really know what to do and where to go. You can ask around,
Right.
but it's tough. It's not easy.
Right. Right.
Mhm,
I totally get it. And I mean, it'd be great if you had a team of people that could sort through all the different options and
mhm,
types of partners out there and whatnot. Small businesses don't really have that option. They've got to a certain extent, go on feel, and their gut will tell them whether this is, after they've had a conversation or two, whether this is a viable option for me at this
mhm,
stage. But you selected an offshore partner,
mhm,
right? And Experion Technologies. They're based in India. Now they have an offices here in the U.S., but primarily in India. Um, and as I said, Experion is the disclaimer is sponsoring this. But we're gonna examine Experion as an example, in the business case, without a lot of ads and promos or anything about Experian. But we'd like your experience or what, given the fact that you did go with an offshore, you probably looked at other options as well, inshore. I know that's logical.
mhm.
But given the language and physical distance, they're 10 hours, 12 hours different from Sacramento, California, where you are.
Mhm.
Um, how were you able to make that decision, and how were you able to communicate your vision early on that you felt like that they tied in with that they got you, they understood where you were going? How did you do that?
Um, Now remember, we're talking years and years ago here, so I'm
Right.
gonna pull the things out of the memory strings here, but I never really had a bias one way or the other to onshore or offshore. Coming into the process, I knew that there was talented people everywhere, and I've never really had a problem with where the development took place. I was much more concerned with capability. Do they understand my industry, what I'm trying to do? Could they see around the corners that I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know, and it was more about technical capability. Sorry, um, that that they could bring. So I know that some folks have that curiosity in terms of like, well, I want to do things onshore or offshore, And I just didn't have that at the moment. People that have that bias, that's fine, but I just
Hmm.
didn't, so to speak.
Yeah, right, right.
But at the same point in time, even if I did have that bias, when you look at a lot of even the US based companies, they're offshoring underneath the hood anyway. So there's very few options that I came across that were 100% US. Then it also comes down to cost because the reason beyond just capability that you would actually choose offshoring is that it's just a heck of a lot less expensive by hour. And you can make arguments around talent one way or the other. I've not found that there is a talent gap across the board. Obviously, when you work with any organization, there's going to be some folks in it that are stronger than others, and that's every company on the planet. But as a whole, I've not seen in all the different tech development type stuff we've done and all the companies that we partner with that have gone in all kinds of different directions. I've never once run across a massive talent gap just because of location.
Yep.
Um, so that is a prerequisite, you know, offshoring or onshoring really didn't matter to me. Now you talk about the time difference. If I had been asked to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, that might have been something, but that was never asked to me, right? We ran our normal business hours for the most part, and the offshore team, Experian accommodated in this case, which I think everyone does, right? So it
Yeah,
never really
yeah.
kind of was an issue for me. Um, but then, once we had, kind of sent out our RFP, for lack of a better way of saying it, to a handful of companies, then you start to get the responses in. And that's where you start to see these companies pull apart from my perspective. On one end, you get some very loosey-goosey, kind of light on information, emails, or maybe a tiny little PowerPoint presentation. What made Experience stand out was it looked like the amount of effort they had put in to getting to know us up front and then regurgitating that back to us in a formal presentation. Um, that initially is what made them leap out to me, was their desire to really get it on day one, not just get a minimal amount of information to give me a quote effectively. It felt
Hmm.
like they were
Hmm.
investing their time in us a little bit, and I liked that. Um, and then combined with them being offshore, the price was in line with what I was expecting. Um, I'm not the guy that ever takes the lowest or the highest. I kind of always look for the middle ground, and that's where they were, because I do want quality. I do think you pay for what you get in a lot of cases, but there is such a thing as overpaying too. So
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I wish it was some kind of complex, massive decision-making process, but it really boiled down to they made me comfortable with what they could bring to the table. They invested more time than others into us in the beginning to get to know us. And, you know, given that, they were able to give us fair pricing that, didn't have any surprises really lined up to it. Every project's going to have its ebb and flows, but, you know, um, there's always the nightmares about them not taking the time to understand you and then, coming back
Right,
mid-process with a massive budget increase. Really didn't experience that.
right,
So
right, right,
hope
right.
that makes sense. I mean, that's a lot of babbling there, but it's
Well, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. Last question here, before we have to wrap up this podcast. But you mentioned as far as them Experian getting to really know you and then managing that process of understanding what you want. Did working with companies that are half a world away, you need technology to just do that.
mhm,
While they're building technology, you need technology to do that.
mhm,
Did Experian, as far as you know, I know this was several years ago, and you
mhm,
had people that were doing it, but
mhm.
did Experian bring the proper kinds of collaboration tools and things like that you needed to really just jump into this thing and get your ideas, share your ideas and their ideas, building the architecture and all of that? Did they bring all that to the table, or did you have to create that yourself, or do you know that?
Um, I'll answer the question in two ways. In the very beginning, where we were sharing our information and what we wanted to accomplish with them. They took it in whatever format we were going to give it. So if we did it in Excel, they took it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and if there is any tip that I'll give anyone that's, in this position where you're trying to figure out who to call and so on and so forth, the more detailed you can be about what you really want, the better it is for you. So spend that time up front, whatever format you put it in, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, the more you can really give a clean explanation of what you're trying to accomplish through work streams, through like, I want to be able to do this and tell a story, right? That's what I mean by a work stream is,
Mm.
I log into the system and I do this. And I start at the beginning and I get my end result. And you'll probably have multiple work streams that a user of your system will go through. But having those levels of details on day one is going to make everything for you a lot smoother and faster. But yes, once we had begun the process of working with them, they brought their best practices to the table. They said, "Well, here are the systems and processes that we use that makes everything work well. Trust us," right? And we wanted that because we're a startup, at the time, and we didn't have any existing things. So that worked. That was exactly what we wanted from them. Was tell me the best practices. Tell me what you're already good at using, so we don't have to invent the wheel. Um, but I'm certain that, if you're an existing company and you're already used to building tech and you're looking for a different provider, that, I wouldn't shock me if Experian would accommodate whatever tech, or communication tools or whatever you're using now. So,
Right. Right. Right.
but yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, great. Well, it kind of wraps up this first version, first podcast. And thank you, Chris. Really
Mhm.
great start. I mean, really fascinating information too. And until we meet again, I wish you continued success. And as you face the human and technical challenge that you have ran into in the beginning, hopefully you've tamed those by this point in time. But you never really the journey never really begins until you go live. And so you're live and probably fighting the good battle every day. So I really appreciate
Mhm.
your help and look forward to our next conversation. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Mhm.
Thanks. Bye.